Hello and welcome to the Agile Speaker. In Season 4, we're turning the spotlight onto the speakers. I want to capture stories, experiences, and helpful takeaways from clients I've worked with over the years, so you, our listeners, hear from the speakers themselves rather than advice from me. They come from a range of different sector, different sizes of business, different experience and background, but what connects them all is they've all taken to the stage, presented in the boardroom, pitched to investors, or have had to influence audiences in some way. As you'll hear, I had such a great time catching up with all of them. I hope you enjoy listening to our conversations and find their advice and top tips helpful. Today, I'm delighted to have Callum Murray, CEO of Amiqus, with me. Amiqus is one of the fastest growing tech companies across the UK, providing a market-leading client and staff onboarding software platform. Their headquarters are in Edinburgh, here in Scotland. Callum, thanks so much for coming along. Lovely to see you. How are you doing today?
I am fantastic. Thank you very much for having me on. I've done a few of these before, but this may be extra daunting that I'll be pausing and very carefully thinking about how I articulate what I say. But yeah, really pleased to join you, and yeah, been looking forward to the chat.
Yes, I think people will be really tuning into that kind of thing. So definitely make sure you get those pauses in. That's appropriate at times, Callum. We first met in the very early days of Amiqus back in 2016, which feels like a long time ago to me, but actually it's only 6 years. Perhaps it feels like a long time because so much has happened since then, and you've achieved a huge amount with Amiqus. Back in 2016, you were on the Royal Society of Edinburgh Enterprise Fellowship, and you were also in the cohort for EIE 16, which is the premier investor showcase event in Scotland for anyone that hasn't heard of it. And back then, I was delivering the pitch and presentation skills workshops for both of those programs, helping all of the company founders to articulate their value proposition clearly to investors, but also pitching to potential partners or clients and customers. And both of those events culminated in a short presentation to a large audience. Now, with that and that in mind, I thought it would be appropriate and quite fun to ask you to share with us a quick elevator pitch on what Amiqus does, Callum.
What an introduction. Thank you. Amiqus are building the UK's most trusted compliance and onboarding platform. That would be in a sentence. What that means is really making it fast, secure, and seamless for organizations to onboard their clients or staff. We do that all the way through our software end to end. We've partnered with and support government, regulators, and organizations across sectors to meet their legal requirements. That's in relation to knowing their client, anti-money laundering regulations, or digital right to work checks. So all of these organizations have to do this work prior to delivering their products or services or offering them a job. So in practical terms, think about moving job, moving home, accessing legal help. It's typically all paper-based and manual, but now, thanks to Amiqus, it's all digital and it's repeatable and can manage it all online. So great experience for the client, for your staff, significant reduction in risk for the business or organization, and huge efficiencies. One example of that would be with the NHS Business Services Authority. They saved about 1.3 million over a 6-month period in COVID through efficiencies that we were able to provide through the Amiqus platform.
Wow, that's amazing. Fantastic. And can you give us a bit of a snapshot of the company now? Because I think back in 2016, I think it was only you at that stage. Is that right?
Probably would have been myself. There were 4 other co-founders when set up the business. They were all part-time, so none of them were involved in the business all of the time, but I recognised that to build a business to scale, we would do a far better job if we had a good cross-functional group of people who are expert in their own areas. So really it was me that was floating around at the time I'm on. We are now a team for about 48 people. We're growing to maybe 55 in the next few months. We are based predominantly remotely around the UK. So Edinburgh I would think of as our HQ with our offices in Leith. We have 9 of the top 10 volume law firms in Scotland rely on our product. Legal was an early market for us. And since then, we now also count the Scottish Government, the NHS, and more recently, HSE Northern Ireland to look after all of the healthcare services for Northern Ireland across all the local authorities. So quite a spread of clients across sectors. From a turnover point of view, we're at about 2.5 million. From an investment point of view, we've raised about 5.5 million in total. But we typically don't really talk so much about the funds raised, but instead the impact we've been able to have with that, how we've been able to grow, that type of thing. So you wouldn't usually hear us shouting too much about the investment side.
Okay, awesome. That's amazing. It's a huge achievement over just those few years. And over the years, we've also worked together one-to-one on your pitch at Scottish Edge, where I think you won 75k in the early days. And then you've also been involved in CivTech 5, and you and your team were involved in the workshops I led. And then I worked with 2 of your sales team last year. And now you're investing in the whole company by giving them access to our new online Agile speaker course, which is really awesome. So we've done a lot over the years, haven't we? So in this season of the Agile Speaker podcast, I'm really hoping to capture stories and experiences and just really helpful takeaways from people like yourself I've worked with who've kind of done a bit of everything, really, so that our listeners can hear from the speakers themselves, as opposed to advice from me, which is what the other seasons of the podcast are. And I suppose just to kick that off, the word presentation often makes people think about only the formal situations, large audience, slides, all eyes being on you. But, as you know, presentation cover a whole spectrum of different critical communications, be it formal to informal, 1 to 100, 1 to 10, 1 to 1, team presentations where there might be yourself and 2 or 3 others. Every single one of these presents an opportunity to you and your team. And I really believe that there's a need to be agile across all of those situations and to be able to move from one to the next. So with that definition in mind, can you give us a snapshot of the different situations that you're involved in day to day, week to week, where you are presenting to people?
Yeah, there are so many. Evidently engaging with clients. A lot for the last 2 or 3 years have been remote and on Zoom. So thinking about how you can present, engage with prospective clients has obviously been a huge shift in how we actually work or think about presentation skills, and whether you're looking down the barrel of a webcam rather than in a room with someone. Investment conversations, we have 6 monthly investor meetings, so whether Edinburgh or London, meet up and present to existing investors, as well as obviously prospective investors, where we obviously first met at that scenario of hundreds of people in a room, doing a very concise pitch or presentation. But more on the day-to-day, you've then got like board presentations. So every other month, we've got a board meeting, various non-execs and investors should all attend that. And it's important that you're able to give a clear, concise message and be able to share information. We also do company-wide all-hands events. So we do that at the moment once every 6 months. We had it a few weeks back. And that's presentations to the rest of the company about progress that we've made, updates, various other aspects of what we're looking forward to, what we've got going on. So that's a presentation to a larger group. And then we also do something like that on a monthly basis in a much shorter format. So we do on a second Monday of the month, we'll look back at the progress, what were the financial results for the month, what did we do, what we're working on, and then each team manager has an opportunity to share what projects are moving forward, how we're doing. So the presentation style and preparation changes from instance to instance, but that the fundamentals remain the same, that if you can present to many, you should be thinking about how you can present to a small group, or if you're doing something face to face, how that can be best managed. And it's so important, whether it's hundreds of people and it's a prospective investor conversation, preparing for that and doing all the work beforehand for that, or a Q&A, whatever it might be.
Yeah,
you need to put the time in, as well as when it's to an individual. There was a conference we were at, SASTER, in Barcelona a few weeks ago, maybe a month or two ago, and there was the chief exec of ZoomInfo was talking. They turn over like 900 million or something. They're at quite a scale now. And one of his points that he made was that he still prepares and talks to himself ahead of having a difficult conversation, which is quite interesting. So the fact that although they are now massive, employ however many thousands of people, whenever he's involved in or has an upcoming challenging conversation, he'll actively rehearse that, talk to himself and think about how that's going to come across. And so obviously it's everywhere, it's all the time,
Yeah, it is. It's everywhere, isn't it? And the people who, I think, often people talk about it being an art, and that, it makes you think, oh, only some people can stand up on a stage and do something like that and make it look so easy. But the reason they make it so easy is the amount of work that they've put in advance, and possibly coaching they've had, and all of that coming together. So those examples that you gave, the board presentations, presumably you're not the only person from Amiqus that's presenting. You'll maybe have other people in the management team presenting as well.
Yeah, that's something that we've done now for a little while. So it's not just come and listen to Callum tell everyone about, listen for an hour and a half. We've changed that up. So we've got our chair is Sir Sandy Crombie. So he'll typically lead the meeting and manage that side of it. So the logistics and move things on. So I'll do a presentation and then invariably defer to the right person. So we'll have Richie, who's a senior commercial manager, will come in. Rachel, who's ops manager, she'll come in and talk more on the the risk register, talk about what we might have going on from a risk perspective. So there are different voices that are heard across the meeting, and because we've now done that format for quite a while, we obviously have thought through what's going to come up, how we're going to present things, how we're going to position something. So we'll often then have a conversation beforehand to emphasise what points we really want to make. And some of it where, there's maybe not as much detail, you can expect questions. So if you're going to go in, Alistair, who's our finance director, his kind of presentation style is very formulaic, very structured, very precise. Here's the bottom line, here's the top line, here's how the costs were managed, here's what the margin looks like, and he'll rattle through a number of facts, which is quite a different presentation style to then Richie, who will come in and talk about the client's progress, what's going on in the pipeline. But again, through some coaching and just recognising where we could improve, sticking to the facts and not going off on a tangent is something that is obviously really useful. So different people, different styles, but something that's thought about. How do we present this? Because it has to be credible and it has to be based in fact, and it's not, opinion based. It's just, here's what's happened, here's what we're doing next.
Yeah. And then the all hands, that's where members of the business can put themselves forward. Is that right? To stand up in front of everybody that's there and do a presentation?
That's another one. So we've got, on a 6 monthly basis, we've got all hands, which is the whole company. And then we've got all the things, which is on a fortnightly basis. And that's the idea of, what are the things? Come and show the thing. What have you been working on? What are you doing? And that's to give an opportunity for people who maybe aren't managing a team, maybe they're not in a senior role, they're maybe not going down the manager track, they're maybe early on. And they're making a great contribution to the team that they work in, which is a small group inside the company. So we work in cross-functional teams of around 10 people. There's then an opportunity on a fortnightly basis to bring something. It could be around a UX researcher's done something around accessibility, or someone's done some work with a particular client, and they want to be able to share that and socialize that across the business. So it gives people who maybe aren't typically going out and doing a conference talk or something like that, it gives people an opportunity to present internally to an audience.
Yeah, which is brilliant because, when those are happening so regularly, it's such a great chance for somebody who might be a bit nervous about doing something like that to just step out of their comfort zone in a relatively, safe space amongst the team and just get a chance to stand up and present and get the experience and learn how to do it and get feedback, I suppose, as well. So I think it's such a great thing that you're doing with that, giving everybody a chance to do that. It's really great. And so thinking about your experiences of the different pitches and presentations that you've been involved in over the years, thinking back to when we first met and started working together, how would you describe your experience of them?
There's been such a wide variety. Looking back, I remember very clearly the second EIE presentation that we did. So the first year that we were involved in 2016, we were given a 60-second slot because at that stage we were quite early on from a kind of traction point of view, and we weren't singled out as one of the companies that you'd maybe want to give extra time to, which is fine. And we did the 60-second pitch, but it was useful, met lots of people, but having done that slot, thought I really want to make an effort to get the longer slot next time round.
Extended pitch, yeah.
And when it came to that, I remember working with small groups of others who were on it. So I think we were broken out into groups of like 3 or 4, and working through that, thinking how am I going to stand out, or how are we going to do this? And
I think there were 12 companies that year doing the extended pitches, so there was quite a lot of you that were being put out on the stage at EIE. I think there was 900 in the audience at the McEwen Hall, and 12 of you doing the extended pitch was something like 6-minute pitch followed by 4 minutes of Q&A, I think, that year.
Yeah, and the first time when we did it, when we did the 6-minute one, I felt like we kind of knew what we were doing. We had totally nailed the kind of visual element of it, and the content was all fine. Like we'd refined it. And then I remember spending a lot of time on the Q&A, thinking, what's the kind of stuff that wants. So there was one year that was at the EICC, the conference centre in Edinburgh, then there was another year that was at the McEwen Hall at the university. And in the first year when I had the extended one, I don't know if I felt like I had a point to prove, or, I knew that we had a great prospects. I think there was some news. I think we'd maybe just appointed Sir Sandy Crombie as our chairman. We had just signed something else. There were 2 or 3 really good news stories that had landed for us in that month. So I was confident that we were on the right track. Things were going to progress. Looking back at it now, we were probably turning over like £5,000 a month, or it was like, we were spending so much money every month and we're hardly doing any sales. So we're very early on in actually having proven things.
Yeah.
And then the next again time, or what I was able to do in that one actually, was in the 60 seconds one, I said, here's what we're going to do, here's what we're going to do, here's what we're going to do. And when I had the one a year later, I stood on the stage and said, last year, I said we would do this. We've done it. I said we would do this. So it was a really clear message of progress, which was obviously all very positive. And then off the back of it, we won Pitch of the Day. So it was a great outcome for that audience. And it, obviously at the time we were raising investment and we're trying to raise our profile a bit more. And that was like a fantastic outcome.
Yeah. And that was the one where we spent time together, I remember at your offices in Leith, zoning in on the Q&A and saying, what do you want to do with, with those 4 minutes at the end? So we'll come on to that a bit later on, I think, because there's quite a good story about that. But do you think, in terms of your experiences, I mean, do you look back and think, yeah, I used to find it really stressful doing that stuff, heart rate up, lack of sleep? Was there anything like that you remember back then that maybe after all these years, getting experience and coaching and support in different ways, that has that leveled out? Do you still feel that? Is there anything around that you could talk about?
I think in 2017, when we were going into EIE, we were raising a round of funding. It was maybe like £2 million, something like that. And at the time, there was a lack of confidence or commitment from investors to say, would we achieve what we were setting out to achieve? And was this possible? Was the valuation correct? So on and so forth. And I had a conversation, I think it was out for dinner. So one of our investors is based in the US, California, and they were across in the UK, and they came up to Edinburgh and were having a conversation, not so much about were they participating or not, they were, but we still had quite a chunk to do. And the conversation was whether it was underwritten or not. So with our chair, Sir Sandy, and this other investor, we're sitting having something to eat, and they'd said, well, the best possible way, if there's uncertainty about what's going to happen with the investment, you should go into the presentation tomorrow based upon it being underwritten. So go up on the stage, present your presentation, know that win, lose or draw, this is all taken care of. It wasn't taken care of, but base the conversation or base the presentation and all your chats throughout the day with prospective investors that, this is a done deal, it's okay, everything will be fine. Approach it in that way. So it was, looking back, it would have been stressful thinking, I'm going to present this, rosy story, it's all, sunshine and rainbows, but actually behind the scenes, we've got a huge chunk to do. We need to find this new investor who's going to come in, how's it all going to come together? So there was a lot, there always is, like when you ever go to do something, there's stuff going on at home, or you've got various other pressures, deadlines, things that are happening, but to be able to compartmentalize it and put it to one side and say, okay, that's fine, all those things will happen, but today, for now, for the next half an hour or for the next whatever period, the sole focus is on delivering this presentation and doing that. So the stress of the kind of prep doesn't change. Like, you'd still obviously need to do that, find the time, put the work in. But having done it, a series of times, it definitely does get easier.
Yeah. Okay. You always appear cool, calm, and collected from a listener's perspective. So that's how you always seem to come across. So yeah, it's intriguing as to, I think people would be interested to know if that's how it feels when you're doing it, or if it's kind of, I don't know, you mentioned the pauses at the beginning, or if it's knowing that in order to come across as being clear, confident, composed, just making sure that you bring in silence as you're going through it, that creates that impression, even if it's not how you feel inside. Is that something you think about?
When I remember coming off the stage when we did it at the EICC, and everything had gone absolutely perfectly. There was nothing that could have been improved on. I remember I had some notes on cue cards, and I was able to glance at them, and I put them into my pocket. And I remember thinking, well, I've got this, like I know this. But prior to that point and going through it, I was often, commented upon that I wasn't enthusiastic, I wasn't as engaging as I should be, I wasn't, coming across as excited. And I'm generally not that as a person. So
I just want to put it out there that I didn't say any of those things.
No. So generalizations, like people would say, oh, you need to do this, what about X, Y, Z?
So spark it up a bit.
Exactly, like make it pop. But see, that's not really how I am.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
when it came to us actually getting together and doing the work, it was like, well, what's authentic? What's realistic? We need to work within the parameters of what you're like.
Your natural conversational style. That's what it's all about.
And I often am told that, I don't go too far. I don't know if that means you're a sociopath, but I don't really get too excited and I don't get too upset. I'm usually just kind of in the middle. Like, and when there's a highly stressful situation or something going on, I'll typically, find out what's happened, what's going on, what do we do next? I don't often have like a big emotional response.
Okay.
Not a robot, but I don't, maybe externally that's not a big thing, but internally, again, Jesus, like, what's going on here? And some of that's personality wise, I think, and there's a chunk of it that's maybe trained. It's not like an innate thing. But realizing, me getting in a panic isn't going to help anything. So
no, that's true. So what I'd like to move on to next, Callum, is what do you think the impact that this skill that we've worked on for a number of years, what impact you think that skill's had on you, maybe on your team, Amiqus as a business?
I think what I've learned and picked up on from the training is so valuable, like recognizing how useful having the ability to articulate yourself or present clearly. It's so useful in so many different circumstances or scenarios. The knock-on effect of that has definitely been trying to reinforce that as a kind of learned behavior or opportunities for people to pick up on the training. So an observation would be that as a founder of a tech company, there are loads of development opportunities for, in this case, presentation skills. You get put on various training courses. There's lots of stuff that you'll get, whether it's Tech Nation across the UK, you grow faster, you're doing stuff, you'll get on one of the programs and they'll put you in all sorts of training opportunities. But equally, there's lots from EIE or for Scottish Enterprise, RSE program. It's all aimed at the founder though. CivTech, like there's loads of benefit you get as the founder. But if you're not the founder, then there's no point in me having all this kind of deep knowledge and skill set of all this stuff if no one around me can understand or appreciate the value of it or gets anything from it. So being able to recognize it's been really valuable and then share that amongst the team, we're in a far better position having 24 or 36 people who have access to training materials and can upskill themselves rather than this kind of key person dependency where if we need to do a presentation, all that needs to be Callum. Like,
and you can't be everywhere at the same time, can you? So
no. And then equally, it's like if we're doing stuff with clients, it's like, well, we've got many other people now who are involved with that, or we're supporting client relationships, we're in a new business, or it could be like internal people work that we're doing. Important that there's like a benchmark or kind of a level that's set so people feel like they're equipped with the skills that they need to do, deliver their role. That kind of led into the opportunity to actually roll out the speaker program through the whole business, because we just recognize how valuable that is. Whether you are in the door within your first 6 months and you're getting settled in, you're going to find it easier to do your role, especially remotely, if you've had presentation skills training and the benefit of that. So we've made it something that's available through everyone's development budget. So it's like now it's a mandatory training. So we've got the Agile Speaker course for everyone, regardless of whatever role they're in. And they're going through that in groups of, I think it's 10 people at a time. And then at that, they've then got a peer group who they can then talk to, share with one another.
No, it's brilliant. It's fantastic. And I think it's part of an induction package for new starters. Brilliant. And Yeah. So yeah, everyone gets Maryanne in the end, one way or another.
Yeah, that's
but it does.
And
it means that it's that thing of everybody in Amiqus will be singing from the same hymn sheet when it comes to that approach of conversational style, not trying to be something you're not, and saving time in the way that you prepare for things. Same kind of mindset around how they prepare visual aids to support their message, all that kind of stuff. Just means that when you've got everybody having the tools and the skills to be able to do it, it's great. And of course, I'm sure you'll already have this, there'll be people in the business who tell the Amiqus story differently to you. And you might sit there and go, oh, I hadn't thought about saying it that way, because they just bring their own stamp to it. So it's so great if they've also got the confidence and the skills to be able to go out and do it.
Yeah, we had an example at the most recent All Hands for Summer one that we had a few weeks back. So Craig, who's in a business development role, he's moved into a relationship role, so he's in a retention team. He was on a table of, 10 people. So we were split out into different groups, and we were talking about the theme of the conference was love is the answer was the overall theme. And what's the question if love is the answer? But it was all around if people love working at Amiqus, that's going to be great. There's going to have great outcomes as a result of that. So if people feel like they're welcome in Amiqus, regardless of who they are, where they come from, what their background is, what circumstances are, that's really important. But equally, if our clients love us, they're going to tell other people, clients love us, that's great. They're going to do more with us. So that was the whole point. We were threading that through the whole week's worth of workshops and things we were doing. And part of it was the groups went off into their cross-functional teams to talk about, what would we do? How could we take this forward? And Craig was the person who was within his team, shared what they did. And afterwards, like 3 or 4 people had said, oh, that was really good. Like Craig fed all that stuff back. And it was quite an innocuous thing. You're in a table, you're going to share back to your colleagues what you did. So that's something that most people could relate to, like that type of scenario. And just the way he stood up, delivered his message, it was all very clear, it was all very concise, very straightforward. And he had previously had training with you. So he and Natalie had gone through
last summer
the training. Yeah. And people had then commented on it. It was really noticeable, like not as a dig about anyone else who presented, but to say it was really clear that Craig has had some sort of training in this, and has he been through the training program. So that was like a good example that it was an internal thing. We weren't making a big deal about it, but just this scenario where he was then able to present really clearly and really well, come across, get his message over.
Great.
But he had some training for it.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so the final part of the podcast, I thought it would be really good to just think about maybe 3 key takeaways to give to listeners. So we've worked on loads of different pitches and presentations. We've looked at the delivery side, so you're clear and confident and using your natural style. We've also looked at the preparation, building up the narrative, and then the notes that you mentioned, and making sure slides are in their place. And we've looked at preparing and handling Q&A. So across all of that work that we've done, if you could sort of think back through it all, if you were to pick out 3 tips or tactics or tricks of the trade that you think about a lot, or things that have really stood out to you and made an impact on how you handle these different presentations, what would they be?
The first one isn't really mine. It's Bob Keeler, who used to run PSN and the Wood Group, and now he does a few different things. So he ran a storytelling session when we did the Scale Up Scotland programme through the Hunter Foundation. So diverse mix of companies, not all tech, so it was like a random stuff. So Bob turned up and did the session, and the thing that he was talking about was actually putting the time in. So when someone says to you, oh, can you come along and do this thing? He would say, well, no, like it's going to take me 6 weeks to do this, to do a good job of this. And he had a certain way of like managing the content, and he had like storyboards and did different things. But he'd done loads of research and loads of reading into it. And one of the things that he was saying is to just wing it is not acceptable. So if you're going to stand up, so if he was the chief executive of the Wood Group, and thousands of people globally, they're looking to him, and if he stands up and kind of half-arses a talk, it does not look good for the business. That's not maybe going out to the public markets or, doing something to that kind of audience, a formal audience, but, everyone's going to remember that, and saying no to stuff is okay. So you're better off if someone asks you to do something and it's at short notice, you don't have time to prep. It's fine to say no. They'll find someone else, and someone else will do it. So that was a good one that kind of stuck with me. Other than obviously the value and the power of storytelling is huge, but at the same time, you need to put in the prep, you need to do your practice. If you don't have enough time, you're not going to do a good job of it.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to remember that audience, how are investing their time, their effort, maybe their money to buy a ticket to whatever the event is. If they're putting their effort to all be there, then if you're going to take part, then you need to make the effort to do a really great job.
Yep.
So so that's a really good one. Just being able to say no if you don't have the time. I remember sitting in on one of his sessions when he did a session for EIE many years ago, and that really stuck with me as well. I remember him saying I thought it was sort of maybe 8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks. That's what he would slot in ahead of an event to know that if he didn't have that 8 weeks, he'd say no.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. What else?
Well, the next one would be about using notes. So I think there's this misconception that if you have cue cards, you're underprepared or you don't know what you're doing. I found that to be the opposite. And actually knowing that I've got a few points on a card, and when we did for the larger pitches, we went to printers and spent a tenner to get our logo printed on one side, and then you've got an A3 type card that you're able to hold, and to some extent it's like a safety net or a crutch. You'd know that if you did need to glance at it, it would get you back on track. And that's absolutely fine. Some people don't do that and they've got a photographic memory, that's fine. But when I did the extended pitch, I knew it front to back, upside down, back to front. I had it on a note in my phone, so I recorded it and then I was listening to it, and I had my headphones plugged in, so I would go to sleep. And as I was going to sleep, I would have it on repeat, and I was just listening to it, and I was speaking it out. My girlfriend knew it back to front. I was saying it back, and she was like, "Oh, you got that word wrong." And I was walking around the flat, like saying it and saying it, saying it. But then when it came to the day, like I did have my notes there, and I had them in my hand, but I didn't need them. But I knew that if I did, or if something happened, like whatever, you could glance down and it would get you right back on track. But it's just like more of an insurance policy. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Like on both occasions, I think, as far as I know, Amiqus is the only company since the beginning of EIE that's won the pitch of the day twice. So a few companies have maybe been there and they'll do a pitch and they'll come back again. And the work that we obviously put into that with your help, we've got a wee record. I don't know what that stands for, but I think that's the example where nobody else has done that before. Yeah,
it's brilliant. And I remember watching the film back from the first time that you did it. And I remember noting that in a 6-minute pitch, it wasn't until 3 minutes that you actually checked the notes. Yeah. And I think what's important for, I suppose, that my message around notes is that it's not about not having them or having them that matters. It's how you use them that's critical. It doesn't look great if you're standing there, holding them in front of your face, reading a script off notes. That's not what it's about. It is literally just having something you can check if you need to. And what was interesting to me that first time was that out of 12 companies, I think only yourself and one other used notes. And I remember thinking, is that going to be something you're judged on when it comes to the pitch of the day? because, they were all brilliant pitches. Everybody did a really great job. But it is that thing where people think, if I have notes, it looks like I don't know what I'm talking about, or, but the way that you used them, which was hardly at all, no one even noticed you had them. It wasn't a big deal, and you got pitch of the day. So yeah, it's really good skill. And what about a third takeaway?
The last one, but I wouldn't say least in the priority that we've been through them, would be on the Q&A. So when we did the presentation, I think it was in 17, or maybe in 16, I put a huge amount of time into the Q&A, so we knew what we covered off in detail over the 6 minutes. So 6 minutes actually goes really quickly, but there's only a certain amount that you can cover, but it leaves open other things for questions. So being very intentional around that and thinking carefully around what questions did we want to prompt, what questions did we expect, and then how could you answer that? So having like a pithy, straightforward but direct or truthful approach to answering a question that you don't want is so powerful. So, actually it felt like I was batting them away. So like someone in the audience was like throwing in the question, and I was like, yep, got that one, and then I could bat it away, and then the next one and the next one. So not spending a long time answering each question.
Yeah.
Obviously it doesn't work in a podcast format, but if you were if I was just giving you like 2-word answers, I've done that, and I've noticed that actually there's a couple of things I've done in the past where there'd be a journalist or someone asking a question and I'll give them a really short answer.
Yeah.
It's a bit unnerving because you're like, oh, yeah, like that was a short answer.
Yeah.
But in the Q&A example with the investor pitch, like a really short answer, sticking to the point, just answer it, like even if you don't. Like, and I think the same in the board, we had some very detailed question came up in our last board, and Alistair, our finance director, was away on leave. But I was able to just immediately answer. So it's a great question, that level of detail. I don't know, but I'll come back to you as soon as Alistair's back, and I'll give you the rationale behind that number, or whatever that thing is. But being able to just very quickly give an answer, so it was really useful. So we spent loads of time, probably a disproportionate amount of time on the Q&A than we did the actual pitch. Yeah. But it obviously worked out well.
Yeah, and the pitch, the Q&A is the scoreboard of how well the pitch has gone. Because if you get lots of questions, it means you're handling them really well, because you're not going off-piste and then taking up loads of time. So you're handling them well and being concise. But it also, if you're getting questions that are specifically about things that you've said, then you've engaged them to listen to you and that you've stimulated that thinking. So the preparation that we did it's all about predicting, provoking what's going to happen rather than just reacting when you're up on stage. And it just gives you that confidence as well, doesn't it? That you can stand there and think, I'm prepared for this. I know how I'm going to handle these questions. We'd very carefully thought about what kind of questions you'd like to talk about. I think you wanted to talk more about the product, more about competition, more about maybe scaling abroad, those kind of things. And so we'd been I remember literally, you barely talked about the product. You said one sentence about competition. And I remember sitting in the audience, my heart was going nuts because I'd just worked with you and this one other guy, Graham from Nuke. And it was really, huge moment to sit and watch it all happening, knowing how much time we put into it. And I remember the first question coming, and it was like, Callum, you haven't really talked much about the product. And I was just like, boom, that's what we wanted. And I could see this twinkle in your eye on stage. I was at the back of the room. Then it was in competition, and you literally had one sentence on competition and you got the question, and you just kept batting them off. And it was so great. And the panel all got their chance to each ask a question, which is really important as well. And you were concise, and that meant that, the whole thing just really flowed. And you got the pitch of the day that year as well. So it was just, it was so, I will never forget it because we'd put so much into it. It was really, really cool. But it was a real, I felt like it was such a powerful example of how you can really control Q&A if you really put some thought into it, and if you really have a good strategy on the pitch to make the Q&A go the way you want. I mean, I reckon, I say this a lot, I reckon you can probably predict 75% of the questions you're going to get asked by what you say in the pitch.
Yeah.
And that's an awesome place to be, I think, when it comes to doing these things.
Yep.
Brilliant. Okay. Super. Well, thank you so much for your time, Callum. It's been really, really brilliant to speak to you. And thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. I really appreciate your time. I think you've possibly got one of the most important speeches of your entire life coming up in a couple of years.
Yeah.
As your groom's speech at your wedding, which is very exciting. And I just wanted to flag up that do keep in touch, because I do wedding speeches too. So I'll be expecting a call to prep for that. But thank you very much.
The other thing, actually, before we wrap up, the other thing that you did do was Kirsty, mine out, who's gone from girlfriend listening to me doing these pitches and speaking them back to fiance. It was a wee while ago when she was moving role, and she hadn't moved role for like 2 or 3 years, maybe longer. And you were then able to give her help with coaching for the Q&A, like the elements of thinking about managing an interview. And that was huge because she got the job.
Yeah. Well, so many different situations, aren't there, where all these skills are really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Callum, for your time. Really appreciate it.
You are very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Great. So if anyone listening would like to find out more about Amiqus, go to www.amiqus, that's AMIQUS.co for more information. And you can also book a demo there. I'll include information about the various different programs we've mentioned in the show notes. And finally, if you want to learn how to be a presenter and be agile across all your critical communications, please go to maryannejohnston.co.uk for information on our courses or to get in touch.